Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program's Teacher Certification course. And if you're standing wherever you are, you can be seated. And I'd like to welcome everyone that's watching online. If you don't have a book, a hard copy of the book, you can always go to the top of the official Peaceful Solution Facebook page, and there's a little, you'll see the character manual, and you'll see a little button next to it. You can drop down and click on the acceptance unit, which we're going to be covering tonight, the junior high acceptance unit, the teacher's manual. We're going to pick up on page 133, where I left off in the last class. Know the difference. We're going to be covering a variety of topics, but mainly, the topic of accountability, positive influences, negative influences, and how to know whether you're being negatively or positively influenced. And then we're going to talk about the influence of peers, of negative peers. Okay, so before we get started in tonight's class, or before we get into the new section, I want to kind of cover a little bit on page 133 of what we went over already in the last class. At the top of the page, we did cover this first part, but I also want to go back to the lesson plan, and we want to look at let's see, lesson plan LP7D number 3. We're not going to read the whole thing. We're just going to read where it says, stress to students that yielding to negative influences can have a detrimental effect on their future. Have students turn to page 132 through 135 in their handbooks and read the section entitled Influences Are Everywhere, and discuss with students some of the influences that they have in their lives. Okay, and last week, or last class, I particularly went over some of the influences of the negative lyrics and music, the violent lyrics that are in music today. Not all music, but a lot of the music is either violent, or it has a lot of references, sexual references, or references about alcohol and drugs, which influence the young people these days. They even have the influence of committing crimes in these songs. So, these things we need to be knowledgeable about what we're allowing, what we're downloading into our ears and through our eyes, what we're taking in. Because as I indicated last class, once we download it, it's there. We can't get rid of it. Once we take it in, it's a permanent part of our subconscious mind. And as I said, you can suppress it over time by the teachings in the Peaceful Solution, and you can learn to push it down and layer the Peaceful Solution over it to where it's pushed down. But once in a while, it's going to pop back up again, and you're going to be wondering, where'd that come from? Where'd that thought come from? Where'd that song come from? Or that scene from that movie? Where did that come from in my mind? I haven't seen that in years. Well, that's the problem with downloading these things. Once they're there, you can't get rid of them. So we got to be careful about what we're doing in the first place. So on Know the Difference, we read, have you ever heard of the age of accountability? And I know when I was growing up, I was always told the age of accountability was about 13 or 12 years old. There's no real, number that you can really count at. What we account as the age of accountability is when you're being taught the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, you are accountable for what you learn. You're accountable to put into practice the things that you've been taught in the Peaceful Solution, no matter what age you are. Okay? Now, in society, they'll say, well, 12, 13 years old, you're accountable for your actions. I remember growing up, I got in a lot of trouble when I was young, and I spent most of my juvenile life in lockdown. And a lot of the children there, they would commit crimes like murder, and they would only do 2 years and get out. I knew one boy because he was a juvenile, they could only keep him detained for 2 years. And they couldn't do more than that in the state of Alaska. So they let him out, and he went out and murdered again. And he came back, and they gave him 2 more years. Okay, by the time he was 18, he already had 2 murders under his belt. But he was released from prison again, and he did a 3rd murder. When he became adult, he committed another murder, and that time he got a lot of time because he was now an adult. Well, they've changed that since then in the state of Alaska. They're saying now that, well, you're going to be accountable at a much earlier age. You're going to be held over, until you're an adult. If you commit this kind of a crime, we're going to hold you over till you're 18, then we're going to try you, and we're going to give you your, lengthy sentence. So they understand that there's an age where you should be accountable of the behaviors that you're partaking in. But what we're telling you here is, if you're learning the peaceful solution, you're accountable, to, you're responsible for the actions that you're taking, in other words, and you should practice what you learn. So this simply means that although you're not an adult, you have arrived at an age where you're responsible for what you think, say, and do, and for the decisions you make. Knowing the difference between positive and negative influences can help you to make choices that you will not regret. If you make a poor choice because of how you allow yourself to be influenced and you choose not to follow values as you learn from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, you will have no one to blame but yourself, because you are at the age of accountability. And again, notice it says you allow yourself to be influenced. As I mentioned in the last class, nobody's strapping us down in a chair and, making us watch a television program, or nobody's putting a gun to our head and telling us to listen to a song. If it's got violent lyrics, sexually explicit lyrics, lyrics about illegal use of drugs, etc., we should make the choice not to listen to these things, because, as we're going to see tonight, the negative influences encourage this kind of behavior, which can lead to the wrong attitude, the wrong actions, etc. So it says, here is how you can tell the difference between positive and negative influences. It says, positive influences encourage and motivate you to make honest, moral choices that demonstrate self-respect and respect for others. Okay? And, remember what respect is from the Peaceful Solution. Showing that same care and concern for others that you want shown to yourself. Page 156, we can go over there real quick. If you look in the character traits on page 156, it says, respectful means to value others as important as yourself and to allow that to show through your actions and attitude. And it gives the example that your principal directs you to go to class, and even though you have a permission slip to go to the nurse's station, you try to explain, but he says no back talk. You say respectfully, yes, sir, and follow his directions anyway. Okay? That's an example of, valuing others as important. Remember, that's an authority figure that gave the direction. And then, also showing that same respect to yourself, not putting yourself in a situation where you can get in some kind of trouble. Okay, now we'll go back to page 133. So just remember that definition of respect. And it says, positive influences encourage and motivate you to pursue positive goals. Okay, and we're going to talk about that word positive, because a lot of times people will say, you really have to keep these definitions from the Peaceful Solution in your mind, because a lot of people will say, well, I am pursuing a positive goal. I want to do, let's say I want to go to high school, and then I want to join the military, right? I have a positive goal. Well, a lot of people join the military, thinking that, because in the military you can learn skills. You can learn how to be an electrician. You can learn how to work on planes, etc. But nobody really thinks about, when they join the military, that you might have to go to war. Okay? And as you know from the Peaceful Solution, the Peaceful Solution teaches us to avoid war. We don't want to have anything to do with war. So sometimes, the positive goals that we think we have aren't actually as positive as we think they are. Okay, so we have to really learn what positive means to be able to learn what it means to pursue something positive in our life. Okay, and we're going to talk about that here in a moment. It says positive influences encourage and motivate you to develop positive moral character. All right, positive moral character, or in other words, a harmless character. Harmless, not bringing harm to yourself or anyone else. And that word moral, let's see, I believe, let's first of all, let's look at the slide. Let's put that first slide up because I want to go back to the character unit and give you the definition of character, because it's talking about developing positive moral character. It says on page 3 of the character unit, everyone has character. Character is what helps each and every person to determine what is right and wrong. A person's character consists of patterns of behavior that are considered either positive or negative. Your character reflects who you are on the inside. It goes beyond what the casual eye can see. Knowing about your character will enable you to understand why you think and act the way you do. Knowing how to identify a positive character in others will help you build strong, positive relationships. Now, remember not to confuse character with personality. You know, character is what's on the inside. You can take the slide down if you like. Character is what's on the inside. Personality is the outer appearance. Okay, so don't get the two confused. So developing a positive moral character. We can go ahead and put up the next slide. And actually we can see where our character comes from. Our character defines what's important to us, what we believe in, and how we treat others just as clearly as our faces and voices define who we are physically. In fact, our character is an integral and part of who we are. And that word integral means it's necessary, it's important. Whether the character we have is positive or negative depends upon many different factors. And these factors include genetics, family values, influences, experiences, choices, and environment. Remember, we learned all those ingredients that make up our character in the character unit. Together they help to mold and shape our character. And if we can look at the next slide, we can look at this word moral to remind ourselves what the word moral means. On page 8 of the character unit, it says that morality is divided in 3 categories: behavior and attitude toward all life, human, animal, and plant, behavior and attitude toward possessions and property, and behavior and attitude toward the environment. It says that moral principles in regard to human life means acknowledging and accepting that life is valuable and all people have the potential to contribute to society. When you have a moral attitude toward others, you accept and appreciate they have the right to live in peace, safety, and security. Okay, now, that goes back to what I was saying about that positive goal of wanting to join, the armed forces. Well, in the armed forces, there's property that gets destroyed, there's people that get maimed, there's people that get killed, so that's not, it's not a moral attitude to want to use force or use some kind of war tactics to try to make things better or change the world. Okay, it's not going to change the world for the better to go against the principles we're learning in the peaceful solution. It's only going to make a matter worse. Fighting doesn't solve the problem. It only makes matters worse. It says you can demonstrate a moral attitude by being respectful toward all people. See, this would end all wars right here. Respect toward all people, valuing others as important as ourselves, that would end all wars right there. If we could all learn how to do that, if we could all be educated in valuing others, treating others with the same consideration, care, and concern we want shown to ourselves, there wouldn't be any fighting. There'd be no reason to fight. Now, this also means not taking advantage of others, but rather showing them care and concern. And if these principles that we just read, those very simple principles we read right there, were kept by everyone, if everyone was educated in these principles and everyone practiced them on a daily basis together, even at school, in the middle school, just think of what a pleasant place it would be to go every day. If, the teachers were treated respectfully, I'm sure they would be much more pleasant to the students. Probably want to give the students a lot more privileges. There'd be a lot less behavioral problems the administration would have to deal with, etc. A lot of schools they don't report a lot of the problems they're having in their school because they're afraid of losing funding. Okay, a lot of things are swept under the carpet because if their school is labeled as a bad school and they have a lot of incidents of violence, etc., they tend not to get the funding that they want. Or if they have low attendance rates at the school, they don't get the funding from the federal government that they need. So a lot of these things are ignored. But the thing is, if children were taught moral character, everything would be better in the school. The attendance rate would go up because most children would want to come to school because they're being treated with respect. They're being shown honor and care from other people. So, because a lot of children, they don't want to go to school because they're afraid to go to school. They're not skipping school because they just don't want to go to school. A lot of them are being bullied at school. And some of them are being bullied by teachers. And sometimes they bully the teachers. Okay? But all this could be dealt with, all these things could be eradicated if this education was made a part of the curriculum, everyday curriculum. Even if it was only 20 minutes in the morning. First thing in the morning, they had a power class of the peaceful solution, a 20-minute power class with the children. It would make a huge difference during the day because the principles and the techniques and the tools that they would learn here would stick with them throughout the day. When incidents arise, they would remember, hey, I learned that in the peaceful solution. Now, how did it say I need to handle that? And it would be fresh in their mind. You know how they say, out of sight, out of mind? Okay? If these principles aren't put in front of them, they're not even going to know what they should do in a situation. So they're going to resort to just doing whatever they think they should do or whatever they feel like doing. Not what they know they should do from the facts that were presented to them by the peaceful solution, because if those facts are never presented, they have no knowledge of them. So they don't even know what the choice is in that situation, other than what they've seen on TV or what they've seen at home, which a lot of homes, there's a lot of domestic violence in homes. There's a lot of fighting with siblings. There's a lot of, you walk into homes, there's loud TV going, everybody's kind of doing their own thing. I'm not saying all homes are like that, but there's a lot of dysfunctional homes. We read about it in the last book. There's a lot of dysfunction. And not one family, I know I'm probably going to get some blowback here. There's not one family on earth that doesn't have some level of dysfunction, okay? Okay? Even if you think it looks great on the outside, well, like the old song says, no one knows what goes on behind closed doors. Okay? And I don't care if it's in the most upscale neighborhood in town or it's in the barrio. I don't care where you live. There's always some level of dysfunction in families. And that's normal because guess what? Is anybody perfect yet? No, nobody's perfect yet, okay? Because we have to learn the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program and get this knowledge that I'm talking about in order to even start making a sensible decision or even know what to choose and what decision to make. Okay, so let's see where I was going here. Okay, I don't need that yet. All right, so let's look at negative influences. Remember, this is how you can tell the difference between positive and negative influences. Negative influences encourage dishonest and immoral choices that can sway you to compromise your self-respect by engaging in activities like premarital sex, underage drinking, and illegal drug use. They can also encourage violence, aggression, as well as criminal activities. Now, this is talking about negative influences. Remember, an influence is anything on page 132 at the top. An influence is anything that affects the way we think, our interactions with others, and the choices we make. And that's why I said last class, we as teachers, we're trying to influence the children, people to make better choices and to use the tools and the tips and the techniques that we're teaching in the Peaceful Solution, because we want to have that influence on how they interact with other people. Okay? Now, so we as teachers have to be careful how we interact, right, in our daily lives, because, you know, children are watching everything and they don't miss anything we do they? You know, I always said every person should have a child in the back seat when they're driving, you know. They'll watch your speedometer, you know, if it's over, if they see they can read a sign, you know, when it says speed limit 50, they can see the 50 and then they can see the 70 on your speedometer and go, hey, wait a minute, you know, Dad, it says 50, yours says 70. Dad, are you going too fast? What are you going to do? Shut up, boy, just let me drive. You know, or are you going to thank him for reminding you, yeah, you're right, I'm going too fast, okay? That's why I said everyone should have a child in the back seat, because they keep you straight, okay? We can learn from children, too. And you got to remember, they're in the back seat. You should have the same care and concern, and you should value their life. You know, they don't have any control over your foot on the pedal, okay? And their life is in your hands, so you should listen to them. They care about their safety too, just like you should care about yours. Reminds me of that sign in Peaceful Solution. I think it's in the self-control unit we're fixing to come up into, where the boy's fishing at a place where there's a sign that says polluted lake, danger, no fishing, and Dad's fishing, and the boy's like, Dad? And he's like, don't bother me, boy, I'm fishing. You know, he's trying to point out on the sign that there's poison in the lake, right? But the dad's too busy fishing, thinking that, hey, you know, quit bothering me. We really need to listen to children. They're really, it's really incredible what you can learn from them. They might just save your life, too. Okay, so negative influences. Let's look at the next slide, because I wanted to show they realize about negative influences and the impact certain things have on children. And one of the things I found was that there was a news story about a study about alcohol ads and how these alcohol ads encourage youth drinking. Like, you know, some of the beer ads that they have on TV where they have the frogs talking and they make it laughable, they make them fun, they make it look fun. And children love animation, children love talking animals and so on and so forth, and they watch these ads on TV and they think they're funny, and they watch them and they associate, you know, certain drinks, alcoholic beverages, with fun or laughter or having a great time, right? Well, when they get into their teen years, as you look on the right side there, this is from drugrehab.com. It says 75% of teens aged 12 to 17 claim that seeing pictures on social media depicting their friends and schoolmates drinking and using drugs motivated them to mimic the behaviors. That's a huge percentage right there. That says 75% of teens aged 12 to 17. That's a lot of teens, okay? They're saying that we see our friends on social media, whether it be, you know, Facebook, you know, the various social media. They see their friends, you know, on there with a bong, or, you know, I've always found it, you know, almost laughable. You know, people go on there and show that they're breaking the law on Facebook. You know, I mean, if I was a Facebook cop, you know, I'd just scroll down on Facebook and go through my scroll, and I could find who to bust all day long. Because a lot of people do illegal activities right there in front of you, thinking that somehow or another they're immune from prosecution. Okay? And a lot of them are doing things online, right in your face, posting pictures, and it's encouraging their friends to do the same thing. That's what this is saying. They're getting these ideas from what they see on social media. Now, social media, I'm not down in social media. Social media could be used for positive uses. But I'm afraid with the lack of moral character education today, it's not going to be used for the right reasons for the most part. Okay? You know, we love social media. We're on it right now, and we're spreading the Peaceful Solution message. but it can also be used for the wrong reasons, as we see here. And I can't fault the children that are doing this when they're not being taught moral character to begin with, right? They need to be taught that this is not acceptable and not to be dragging people into these negative behaviors because it's bringing a lot of people down. Let's look at another influence here. You know, you got the influence of violent video games. Okay, it's a huge influence. I think the last numbers I saw, the video game industry was $12-13 billion a year. Remember, I told you, you know, I think it was the last class, these profits, this money making. It's the people that make these games are not interested in what you think about them. They're not interested in how old your children are that are playing them. They don't care, quite frankly. They think it's your job as a parent. If you don't want your children to play them, well, that's your job to keep them from your children. Okay? Their only concern is putting them out on the market and selling and making profit. Profit's the bottom line. So we have to be educated, and I'm not just talking about children or parents guarding their children. I'm talking about even adults guarding ourselves against these influences. Don't you think it's just a little bit strange that I always thought the movie rating system was kind of laughable too? You know, rated G, you know, ages what, you know, 5 to 18 or what, 1 to 18. Or everybody can watch it because it's clean. PG, PG-13, R. I don't know how many ratings they got now. I know X-rated was like the highest, or triple X when I was growing up. But I don't know what they use now, what kind of system. But don't you think that that movie that has those sexual references and the violence and the crime and the drugs and the excessive drinking, the drunkenness or whatever they're showing, don't you think it has the same effect on you as it has on that child? No matter what age you are? Okay? In other words, why do we say, well, it's okay for people over 18 to watch this film? Everybody under 18, stay away from it. It might have a negative effect on you. It has a negative effect on all of us. Okay? If it's negative behavior, it's going to have a negative effect. That's just a given. Okay? And then, you know, of course, I put, you know, the violent video games. And then there's another influence of the Army, you know, the advertisements of getting people to join the military. Okay? Did you know that they have, I know Chris recently in a seminar we had, Chris, one of the teachers, he showed on these interactive violent video games online that they have recruiters actually actively recruiting children online to join the military that are using these games. Okay? You need to do your research. I think in the next book, in the self-control book, we're going to get into how, I think in later lessons, we'll get into how the military actually actively works with video game makers and how even the movie makers have offices at the Pentagon. Okay, the war people, they work together. These entertainment industries work together with the war industry to try to recruit people into their ranks. Okay, they have a huge problem recruiting people, but they find that these video games with all this violence, you know, when they catch the child in the right mood, when they're playing that video game and that recruiter pops in and says, "Hey, how would you like to join this branch of the military?" You know how feelings are, right? Acting on emotion and not really thinking things through. A lot of people sign up. I remember they said at that movie, it was that movie Top Gun, Tom Cruise movie, I think it was back in the 80s. They actually had recruiters in the movie theaters signing people up after the film. Okay? And they said they had the highest enrollment ever. Okay? You know why? Because it's a feel-great movie. You know, you got planes flying, you know, loud roar of jet engines. You had a pretty girl, you know. You had all the right visuals and all the right music. You know, they had all this music soundtrack that was really great. And so when you saw the film, you were like all pumped up, so when you saw that military recruiter, waiting over there and, hey, how would you like to sign up and join the Air Force? Oh man, that looks like a great time, man. It looked like a great, man. If I'm going to have the time Tom Cruise had in that film, yeah, sign me up. Well, then they sign up and then the real rude reality hits, They end up getting sent off to some war and it's not so pretty. Okay, it's not as pretty as it looks in the film. Okay, the reality sets in. So these influences, there's a huge impact on people. So let me continue in the reading here on page 133. That second negative influence says, negative influences encourage you to pursue negative goals that could cause harm to yourself and others. Is that something that the peaceful solution wants us to do? Harm to ourselves and others? No, because remember, that's not moral. Moral means not bringing harm to yourself or someone else. So that would eliminate any kind of fighting, any kind of contact sports that might bring some kind of harm to somebody. Think about it. I was reading just 2 days ago, there was a professional football player, I believe he played for the Patriots. It was Aaron Rodgers or somebody. He ended up in prison for murder. He ended up committing suicide in prison a couple years ago. But he was a very famous football player, and he committed a murder. Well, come to find out, they did a scan on his brain. Football is a contact sport. Okay, and these guys get hit very hard, and they hit hard. They're taught to do so. They're taught to try to, nail that guy with your helmet, as hard as you can and try to knock him out of the game. Okay, so they're getting their head jarred constantly. Okay, and his brain, they said, had so much damage. They said it was similar to another player that committed murder as well. They said there was something wrong with his brain that actually caused him not to be able to make rational decisions and commit murder. Okay, this is something that is actually being seen now in the NFL. They're actually seeing all these head injuries and they're going, wow, all this damage is being done. But is there being anything done to stop the game? They know it's causing harm. It doesn't just cause head injuries. I've seen people get their neck broke. I've seen people die in football games. I've seen people die from getting hit in football games. So it's something that's a risk-taking behavior, and we don't encourage risk-taking behavior or bringing harm to somebody or yourself, okay? Anything that can bring any kind of harm to you or someone else, we shouldn't want to engage in it, is what I'm telling you. And I'm sure if you just sit and you meditate on it for a while and think about all the things that bring harm to people, you can probably start thinking along some of these lines. It says negative influences encourage the development of negative character traits like retaliation, aggression, and hatred. Retaliation, the wanting to get even. Again, that's retaliation has never brought peace. It's never solved the problem. Show me one time that it did. Okay, and the argument might be said, well, the United States won World War II. They dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Japan, and they surrendered, and that ended, the reign of terror, and now, everything, that stopped the war. Well, but did that stop the wars? Did that stop people from pursuing nuclear weapons and from fighting? There's been many wars since World War II. And now we're on the verge of nuclear war. They're talking about it constantly every day now in the news. Okay? So did it really put an end to wars, or did it just put an end to that war? Because retaliation, when you beat your enemy, what they do is they'll go and they'll wait a while until they get enough weapons or they get enough allies, to gang up with them to come and take you down. They don't forget. If they're not taught the peaceful solution, they're taught to retaliate. And eventually they come back and try to get even. So this aggression, retaliation, and hatred, none of these things are going to bring peace in our lives. So we've got to know the difference, as we're shown here on this page, the difference between positive and negative influences. Remember, if it's trying to get us to bring harm to someone or ourselves, it's teaching us to be disrespectful, encouraging us to commit some kind of crime or get involved in drugs and drinking. And yes, right now, drinking is illegal for you. If you're a teenager, it's against the law to drink. Okay, so if they're encouraging you to drink, just know it's breaking the law. And it's actually, even if you don't get caught, you're bringing harm to your character. You're destroying your opportunity to develop a positive character. So let's go to page 134 now. Okay, and we're going to read the influence of negative peers. It says, in the lesson on friends, you learned about the importance of choosing friends who have a positive moral character and some of the barriers to forming friendships. Now, you remember what a barrier was. It's something that's trying to keep you from going from becoming it's trying to keep us from developing a positive character. A barrier is something that's trying to keep you from getting from one point to another. It says, because friendships are such an important part of your life right now, it's crucial that you're aware that friends have a powerful influence on each other. Although this influence can be positive, it is often negative. It's kind of like, you hate to be the bearer of bad news, right? but it's true. Right now, because of the lack of moral training, it's always going to go to more of the negative side. Okay? Just sad to say. Negative influences in the form of peer pressure can lead to risk-taking behavior like experimentation with drugs, alcohol, premarital sex, and crime. Let's go back to the slideshow for just one moment, but go forward one slide. You can put up go to the next slide. I put them in the wrong order. Okay, peer power. You remember on page 70 of the character unit about peer power. I'm going to read that for you. It says, as you get older, you rely on your friends more for companionship and acceptance. It's nice to be around others who are fun and share similar interests and personality traits as you. Having friends is great, but friends can also influence each other in negative ways. Here's the problem. If your friends accentuate the negative and not the positive traits in their character and encourage you to do the same, they are influencing you in a negative way, and this is called peer pressure. And that's what we're talking about here on page 134 is the influence of negative peers. And how, and I've said before, you can take the slide down, I've said before that peer pressure isn't so much the pressure people are putting on us, it's the pressure within ourselves to want to fit in, or we don't feel strongly enough about what we think we believe in. Okay, like I gave the example of, you would never allow someone to talk you into walking off a 40-story building, You would never let them convince you that you're going to be okay if you walk off that building and step off the building, because the law of gravity, right? Unless you have a parachute. But the law of gravity, you're going to die if you step off that building. So you're not going to let somebody talk you into doing that, because you firmly believe in the law of gravity. But on the other hand, if somebody tells you, hey, why don't you try and sniff a little bit of this glue? It makes you laugh and giggle, and you're kind of thinking, are you sure? I've heard that stuff, can kill you, can hurt your brain. Oh, no, I do it all the time. It's fine. Just try it. Believe me. If you don't have the firm belief that glue is going to cause some kind of harm to you in some way, shape, or form, then you're going to probably go ahead and try it. Okay? So it's not so much the pressure that's being put on us, it's that we don't really firmly believe in and stand up for what we think we believe. And that's why we have to actually believe in the things that we stand up for. We've really got to have a firm belief that if we go against anything the peaceful solution teaches, there's going to be some kind of consequence. Whether we can see it right away or whether it comes later on down the road, there's going to be a consequence. Now, also, I want you to go back to page 68 real quick. We're going to look at something here in this book, page 68. about peers. Page 68. About conformity. Conformity meaning trying to fit in, wanting to fit in, or the pressure to fit in with your friends. Because everybody, like it says, it's okay to want to have friends. Okay, friendships are great. And, we don't want to feel left out. Nobody wants to feel left out or feel like an outcast. We all want to have friends. It's a natural thing. But we should not want to be accepted for the wrong reasons. And negative conformity, as it shows in the middle here, it says, is when you're encouraged to disobey a proper authority figure. We should only disobey authority who asks us to do something wrong. Remember like that principal that asked the child to go back to his class, and the child was like, but I have a permission slip to go to the bathroom. Well, no, I asked you to go back to your class. Okay, yes, sir, I'll go back to my class. That's respect for proper authority. That's the principle of the school. There's proper authority. Now, what if that same principal told you, to go cut your wrists? Should you do that? No, because he's asking you to do something that would bring harm to yourself. Okay? So you don't need to obey the authority if they're asking you to do something that could bring harm to yourself or somebody else, property, or the environment. But what if it's your mom or dad? What if they ask you to do something wrong? Shouldn't you obey your mom and dad if they ask you to do something wrong? No. Any authority. Now, what if your mom asked you to do the dishes? Is she abusing you? Should you say, no, Mom, that's child abuse. I'm not doing the dishes. Is it child abuse to do chores? Of course not. Okay? I'm not saying tell your parents that you have to remember, if it brings harm to yourself or someone else, and you could say, okay, if you're 11 years old, well, it does bring harm to me. I don't like doing dishes. It makes my hands wrinkly. It makes my hands wrinkly. They look like prunes. It's harming me. No, it's not harming you. You'll be fine. Trust me, my hands look like prunes many times doing dishes. You'll recover. Okay? So it's talking about if it's asking you to do something that's against the law or that will bring harm to yourself or somebody else. Negative conformity is when you compromise your safety or the safety of others. Okay? Like speeding. Okay? Or you go against moral values that you've set your mind to follow. You've learned this peaceful solution. You've learned what you've learned so far in the peaceful solution. And you've set your mind in advance. I'm not going to let anybody stop me next time, my friends or my acquaintances encourage me to go out on Friday night and get drunk and go speeding around town in their car. I'm going to say no. I got my mind set. I'm not doing it no more. Well, guess what? Once you set your mind to something, guess what comes next? The test. You're going to be tested to see if you really mean what you're saying. Somebody's going to come around and say, hey, you want to go cruising tonight? You want to go to the party? They're having a kegger over there. Everyone's going to be there. There's like 4 schools that are going to be there. Surely you don't want to miss out on that, right? And man, all the chicks are all going to be there. I mean, come on. You can't miss this. Well, guess what? You can miss that. And guess what? The only thing you're going to miss out on, let's see what you're going to miss out on if you don't go to the party. You're going to miss out on a possible raid by the police, right? You're going to miss out on a possible trip to juvenile detention. You're going to miss out on a possible STD you catch because you got drunk and went and messed around with somebody you shouldn't have. You're going to miss possibly a bullet, because I've been to many parties when I was growing up with young people, and there was guns, and people get silly when they get drunk, and they have weapons, they have guns or knives, and they get silly, and they start acting like they're 10-foot and bulletproof. Okay, so you just might miss out on some lead. You might miss out on some lead. Let's see what else you might miss out on. Well, you might miss out on a negative reputation because your parents found out you were drunk. I don't know about you, but my mom could smell everything. I would come home. She's like, "Those cigarettes you got? Let me check your pockets. Come over here." She'd find a pack of cigarettes. All right. She'd take them and put them in the sink and drown them, give them back to me. Here you go. Here's your cigarettes. Oh, Mom, those cost 50 cents. Back then, that's all they cost. But Mom was there to make sure, and she could smell if there was anything going on. I'm thankful that my mom had a great nose like that. Because she didn't do any of those things, but she knew what they smelled like. I don't know, she went to some kind of training or something. So anyway, negative conformity, it says, is not the path to choose. If you follow that path, you're going to hit a dead end. Don't follow the crowd in doing wrong. The only thing you're going to miss out on not partaking of negative character traits is a negative character. Okay? But what you're going to gain from saying no to these behaviors is, guess what? You're going to gain a positive character, a positive reputation. You're going to gain the strength that you need in your mind to know, hey, I can say no to these behaviors. I don't have to do that. I can say no. I don't have to do that. Once you say it once, and you say it twice, and you say no again, it gets easier as you go. And pretty soon, it's like riding a bike or driving a stick shift. At first, you always had to look at what you were doing, and you were jerking around, and you just thought you could never get this right. And pretty soon, you were doing 50 things while you were switching gears, right? And not even thinking about it. It's the same thing with the peaceful solution, but you got to practice it. Practice, practice, practice makes perfect. Okay, so let's turn back to page 134. So it says, negative influence as a form of peer pressure can lead to risk-taking behavior like experimentation with drugs, alcohol, premarital sex, and crime. Keep in mind that negative peer pressure occurs when you feel pressured by so-called friends to do things you know are wrong in order to feel accepted. This means that a true friend would not try to influence you to do wrong. Also, keep in mind that you must lead others. You're the person who's learned the Peaceful Solution Character Education program. You can now lead others. Think about that. Think about that. You can lead other people. In fact, they're not being taught the Peaceful Solution right now. You are. And you're a leader whether you realize it or not. And you're like a shining light to them. They need somebody that knows these simplest things that you've learned so far in the Peaceful Solution. When you actually do them in front of other people, they take notice of it. And they're like, you stand out to them. You're going to stand out. They're going to notice it. And you can lead them. And you can try to influence your friends toward that same honest moral behavior instead of allowing them to influence you. Now, wouldn't that be a great thing? Because they've already got all these other people leading them to do all these negative things. They don't need another negative leader. They've got a whole slew of them. What they need is somebody that will actually do the opposite. They're actually, would you believe this? Children are actually waiting for somebody to actually do that. They actually want to see. I remember, I can tell you from experience, I can tell you many times that we actually would look at somebody and think, you know what, this person's for real. And they would do things that were really great, but then they would do something really silly and be like, oh man, I thought that person was the one, I really thought that person was, right? They're looking for somebody that really means business. Children are waiting to see who will actually do these things, who will actually be a peacemaker, who will actually, instead of saying, ooh, you're going to let him talk to you like that? What, are you some kind of punk? Ooh, man, egging it on. They're looking for somebody that will actually try to diffuse the situation. Like, hey, man, it's not worth it. Don't worry about it, man. It's not worth it, man. Okay? They want to see, children really do want to see a leader. They want to see somebody that means business. Because if you do that and you stick with the Peaceful Solution and you don't let them sway you and you set your mind in advance and you do what you're learning here, you can lead others in a positive direction, and they're going to look to you for leadership. They're going to look to you as a very, very great person, okay? But they're looking for somebody that's actually going to do it and not be wishy-washy, okay? If you'll do it, it will encourage them to do the same thing. But they got to have somebody that means business. Don't confuse negative peer pressure with being forced to take part in activities that you might not feel comfortable with. You can be pressured into doing something and not even realizing that you're being influenced to make a choice. For example, you get permission to visit your friend while at his house. He offers you a cigarette he stole. There's 2 strikes. Cigarette, he stole it. Right? When you refuse, he shrugs his shoulder and he says, yeah, all right, if you think you're better than me. How would his response make you feel? Notice he didn't tell you not to smoke it. No, notice he did not tell you to smoke it. He simply implied that if you did not take the cigarette, you would be conceited or stuck up. You know, it's called misery loves company, you know. I mean, I know, because I used to tell people the same thing, and it was like, if they told me they wouldn't do it, I only got upset because I wanted someone to do it with, you know. I didn't want to drink alone. I didn't want to smoke alone. I didn't want to do any of those things alone. I liked doing stuff with other people. It was more fun. But if somebody told me no, it made me, I already knew it was wrong, but if somebody told me no, it was like, man, he's affirming in my mind that it's wrong. I don't like that. I don't like the fact that he's telling me that I'm wrong, right? We don't like to be told we're wrong. But isn't it great that some people stand up for what's right? It says another example of how subtle peer pressure can be is during school, your friends ask you to skip class and go to the local arcade. Now, how many of you know what an arcade is? They don't have arcades anymore. This book's a little bit old, okay? Let me just say this. The word arcade is old, but this information is timeless, okay? But I want to show you what an arcade is. I actually thought about the people that didn't know what an arcade was. Here's an arcade in the 1980s. You see the Star Wars, and these are very primitive games, you know, Pac-Man. Probably has asteroids, you know. This was the arcade, the video game place we would go and feed quarters in the games all day long. I don't know where we got all the quarters. I know most of mine I probably stole. But we would just sit there and feed that stupid thing and play these games, you know, for hours after school. Or we would skip school and go to the arcade to play. Well, guess what? You don't have to do that anymore. Here's the arcade in 2021. Right in your hands. Okay, you don't have to leave your bedroom or your living room or your school. Some of them are doing it in class. That's the new arcade, okay? So when they use the word arcade here, the arcade is this primitive thing on the left, okay? All right, so now that we know what an arcade is, so they ask you to skip class and go to the local arcade, you think about it and then refuse. They reply, oh, come on. Come on, man. Don't be such a drag. Now, again, that's an old vintage term there, you know, drag. Have you heard that lately? You're a drag. I heard that in the 70s, okay? So whoever wrote this story right here was probably influenced by, they probably grew up in that time period that I grew up in the 70s. Oh, come on, don't be such a drag. Don't you know all work and no play will make you dull and boring? Now, again, they probably watched that same movie I learned that in where it says, you know, the guys, I remember the guy was working on a book. It was a horror film. He's writing a book. They go up to this lodge, and he's supposed to be writing a book all winter long, and his wife thinks he's writing a book, and then she comes up behind him and looks at what he's writing, and all he's been writing for all those months was all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Like a million times he wrote it on his typewriter. So they probably got that. You see how powerful influences are? This is what sticks. When I see that term, all work and no play makes you dull and boring, I think of a movie. I think of a certain movie. Okay? That's how powerful these influences are. They stick in your mind. Come on, let's go. We'll be back before math class. How would their response make you feel if they told you that? Will you be more or less inclined to stay in school or go to the arcade? If he tells you, man, don't be a drag, you know, don't be boring, come on. Okay, well, it's probably going to make you feel like you should go with him, right? But standing up to these forms of negative influences can be difficult, especially when you care about what your friends think about you. But here's something else you should care about. Your ability to resist negative influences and make choices that are positive, moral, and beneficial. In other words, we should be more concerned about our ability to resist. In other words, to say no, to not give in, to set our mind in advance, like we were taught in the peaceful solution, set our mind in advance to not let anyone or anybody talk you into doing something that you know is wrong. You know it's wrong to skip school. Okay? Don't sit there and tell me you don't know that it's wrong to skip school. So if you know it's wrong, resist it. Tell them, hey, we can go after school if you just got to go to the arcade. You shouldn't want to go to the arcade. If you're a peaceful solution student, what's at the arcade? We don't even have an arcade anymore. So the arcade they're going to go to now is they're going to go home and play these video games. And most of them are what? What do they got on these video games? It's mostly violence. Mostly some kind of game where you have to blow things up or run people over or do something to score points. So what you should care more about is your ability to resist these negative influences and make the positive moral choice that's beneficial. Negative peer pressure has been around a long time. You know how long it's been around? Since the beginning of time. Okay? You don't have to become involved with negative peers to recognize a wrong choice. You can learn from the mistakes of others. And that's what we were saying about experience isn't the best teacher. Experience is the worst teacher. You should already be able to look at, I showed you all through the peaceful solution, everywhere in these books, you see someone making a wrong choice and you see the results of that wrong choice. You see all the possible consequences that come from. Why can't we just learn from that? Why do we have to do it ourselves and experiment? The experiment's going to fail. It's failed for everyone else. Don't think, well, that person wasn't smart enough. I'm a smart criminal. I'll get away with it. That's what they all have said. That's what they all have said. I'll never forget that picture I saw in a Mexican newspaper. It was a drug cartel guy. He was wanted for a long time. And he had, probably billions of dollars. He had all the security systems. He had all the people bought off. He had everything in his pocket. He had the whole world in his pocket. And I saw on the front page, in the Mexican newspapers, one thing I love about them is they don't edit anything. Okay, they show what took place. Okay, and it had the guys standing there, the federales, the police, the federal Mexican police standing all around him with machine guns, and he's standing there in his underwear, and the caption says, "I lose. I lose." Well, we're going to lose too, okay? Because everyone thinks they're going to commit the perfect crime. Everyone thinks they're going to get away with it. Nobody got away with anything. No one's getting away with anything. We're not going to get away with it. There's always going to be a consequence, whether we see it immediately, a month from now, a week from now, a year from now, 10 years from now. Eventually it catches up. That's the peaceful solution teaching, and it's true. It's a true fact. Now it says, above all, what you learn now will guide you and keep you safe and healthy all your life. So don't let anyone stop you from pursuing knowledge. And it says, bear this in mind. When dealing with negative influences, the first choice you should make is to exercise your self-control. If you choose to go along with the crowd, only you will be held accountable for your actions. Yeah, they'll be held accountable for their actions too. Okay? They'll be held accountable as well, but you're going to be held accountable for your choice. I'm going to be held accountable for my choice. I'm not going to be able to blame somebody else for my choice. I'm not going to be able to point the finger and say, well, Your Honor, I did this to him because he did this to me. Okay? The judge isn't going to buy that. In fact, he's probably going to give you more time because he sees that you haven't learned responsibility yet and how to be accountable for your actions. So he's going to say he probably needs a little more time behind bars to learn some responsibility. Because he's still making excuses. He's not sorry for what he did. He's just making excuses. We got to stop the excuses. We don't have an excuse. The peaceful solution is giving us so much information, isn't it? It's giving us the details. Things are being laid out in such detail. We don't have an excuse, and we're accountable to take this information and use it, okay? We really got to use the things that we're learning, put them into practice, and experiment with the positive things, because you'll see if you experiment with the things the peaceful solution tells you you should do in a situation, you'll actually see it works. Experiment with that. Experiment with the positive things that you're learning. The other things aren't going to work. It hasn't worked for anybody, and it won't work for us. So that concludes tonight's class. The next class is going to be on the 22nd. I believe it's Wednesday, the 22nd at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's been a pleasure, and I believe our next teacher will be Catan. So I hope everyone's here. Try to stay warm in the cold weather, and we'll see you next class.